Good morning, everyone, and welcome to join our Auntie Open webinar with our topic today being resilience, turning adversity into asset. Hey, my name is Mikael, and I work one of the customer happiness managers here at Auntie, and our expert giving our presentation today is Margaretha Madoures, who I'll give the stage to shortly. Before we begin, and we'll give a few moments for people to come online, just a few practical things. Your microphones are muted. And if you have anything, thoughts, ideas, questions, there's something you want to share, please use the chat functionality. And of course, you have also the Q&A section available. So don't hesitate to leave questions for us to answer at the end. So like I said, our topic today is resilience, turning adversity into asset. And I'm certain we all know that changes and challenges are an inevitable part of human life. And it's, of course, perfectly natural for these to be distressing as well. So we also know that accepting and adapting to change can also be difficult for us. Keeping that in mind, we're actually in this scenario where we are globally in a scenario where it is not the easiest one. And we are kind of also facing a form of mental crisis where about 15% of working age adults live with some kind of mental disorder, and about 12 billion working days are lost every day to depression and anxiety. So it's the uncertainty about things happening around us that can cause anxiety, and we may not be sure what to do next. So the challenges we face are often related to life changes, so we need resilience. On the topic of resilience, the word itself, resilience, actually comes from Latin's verb resilire, which means to jump back or recoil from something. From Auntie's part, to help our customers and end users deal with these kind of issues and scenarios, we have actually included two new packages to our selection, specifically concentrating on the topic of helping to build resilience. Those are called Bounce Back and Bounce Back Together. We'll present those shortly also at the end of this presentation. But with that, I'm happy to give the stage to our lovely expert, Margaretha. So, like I said, the stage is yours. Take it away, and we'll go through the packages at the end. Please enjoy.
Thank you so much, Mika, and good morning to everyone joining. As the topic has already been introduced, I'm going to be talking about resilience. So let's dive right in. Before I do that, however, I just give a really brief background about myself. My name is Margaretha Madoures. I hold a master's degree in clinical psychology. I'm also trained in solution-focused brief therapy. I'm a relaxation therapist. I offer private counseling, and I hold webinars such as these, as well as work most of my time as an Auntie professional. So I do those one-on-one sessions that some of you might have already tried out. And then I also write blogs occasionally. All right, but let's get into the interesting bit. So I'd like to give you the chance to start with this webinar in a comfortable way. So first, I'd like you to take a little moment to pause. So the section is, of course, you don't have to join, but I invite you to, because it is pleasant and it might make it easier for you to take in the information that I'll be shortly presenting. So before we start, let's do this little exercise together. It will only take a short moment of your time, and I hope you'll give it a try. First, get comfortable in your chair. If you want, you can close your eyes if it helps you to concentrate, or you can fix your gaze on a point in the distance. Then bring your attention to your breathing. For a moment, focus on your breathing and try to breathe calmly and deeply. Perhaps you can put your hands on your belly and feel it rise and fall with each in and exhale. Now think of one thing that is going well in your life, something that makes you happy, or something that for which you are grateful. Or alternatively, choose a moment that has brought you joy recently. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be a simple everyday thing. For example, the pleasant weather in the morning, a hug from a child, or a laugh with a colleague. Take a moment to think about that meaningful thing and reflect what made it so valuable and important to you. Take a moment to also dive into the feelings and thoughts that this thing or situation evokes in you. Enjoy them for a few more breaths. And if you're ready, you can now slowly open your eyes again if they were closed and slowly come back to this moment. I hope this exercise already provided you with a small break from potentially a very busy day and that you now feel ready to start this webinar. Let's talk about what I will be talking about. So first, I'll be diving a bit more into the definition of resilience. And then secondly, I'm gonna try to answer the question to some extent on how you can improve your resilience if it's not quite there yet. And finally, I will do my best to try and leave some time for questions and comments, and then try to answer them as well if there are questions. All right. So, what is resilience? Resilience seems to be this kind of trend topic of recent years. Probably all of us have come across it, at least in some context. And sometimes it can even get a bit annoying because it's everywhere now. And that's understandable. What's in it for you? Well, generally speaking, resilience is the psychological ability to bounce back, and in other words, the ability to recover from setbacks and crises. Resilience is the ability to confront challenges in a constructive way. In other words, you have some way of adapting to and recovering from adversity. Resilience is both a skill and a trait that we are born with. Each day we navigate through small or large challenges, often without even realizing it. But when something significant and impactful occurs, we are typically confronted with uncertainty, wondering how we will continue. Resilience is needed, for example, during stressful life events. Prolonged everyday situations have required each of us to learn to live with the situation. Resilience is often compared to a rubber band or a flexible tree. A rubber band can stretch and bounce back again and again and retain its ability to function. So, resilience is the flexibility, elasticity, and the ability to recalibrate, and it can be consciously developed. That's positive, especially if you sometimes think you're not very resilient in some situations. So, let's think about a recent adversity. How well did you cope with it? If you think back to the last time you faced adversity, how would you rate your resilience at the moment on a scale from 0 to 100? 0 meaning that you didn't feel resilient at all, and 100 meaning that you felt completely capable of dealing with the issue. I will now give you some examples that can illustrate your own or where you are probably on that scale. So, awareness of your own level of resilience is the first starting point for developing your resilience. It is good to be aware where you are at the moment. So, let's say you're about here. Change and adversity put a huge strain on you. You also worried a lot about the future. That is an indicator that you're not quite not feeling very resilient at all. If you're somewhere around here, the situation and the emotions it caused were very difficult to accept still, but and it potentially took you quite a long time to move on from the situation. Then if you considered you're about there, I don't know, I would say maybe that's like 55, 60, you would already feel quite optimistic. You feel like you've moved on, but you still find your thoughts drifting into the past and into potentially ruminating. And then finally, you might consider yourself quite resilient already in a specific situation. It might have still felt bad, but you got back to normal life relatively easy. Can you see how you can use these types of examples to indicate how resilient you're feeling in those moments. So, what's resilience made of? So, since childhood, life has asked for your resilience, how to lose in a game, how to wait for your turn on the swing, etc. Naturally, childhood experience influenced the development of resilience. Among other things, a secure environment, family support, and the opportunity to review successes and failures with parents all contribute to the development of resilience from an early age. If you have children on your own, this should also be taken into account. However, regardless of the environmental part in which you grew up, you can also develop and strengthen these skills in adulthood. So, resilience is in its basic form based on taking care of your basic needs. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and social relationships are part of healthy resilience. So, if you're in the midst of adversity, you may find it challenging to meet your basic needs. You're, for example, not getting enough sleep, you're not enjoying your food, for example. So, during those times, it's particularly important to think about how you can take care of these basic needs according to the resources that are currently available to you. So, taking it easy at night, even if sleep doesn't come easily, is one example to get a little closer to meeting your sleep needs. Taking care of drinking enough water, even if eating is a bit difficult at the time. Or going for a walk instead of hard exercise. See how there's a difference between the options. You don't expect the usual level of fulfilling your needs when it's not possible, but instead you find creative ways that lay somewhere in between doing nothing and doing it all. Then there's another part of resilience that I'd like to talk about, and that's the part that is made of quite ordinary skills. So these include, for example, the goals and values, the ability to regulate your emotions, and applying a solution-oriented attitude and realistic optimism. It's important to know your own skill level in order to be able to set meaningful and realistic goals for yourself. Positive emotion regulation strategies refer to the way of dealing with negative emotions brought about by adversity. Instead of avoiding or blaming others, it is worthwhile to examine and try to name the feelings first. Emotions cannot be controlled, they will come anyway. You don't choose them. That's important. Solution focus refers to focusing on finding solutions rather than focusing mainly on the problems. Realistic optimism, on the other hand, refers to keeping a positive but realistic attitude towards the future. So, why is resilience so important? Let me check the time that I'm not okay. I'm doing okay. So why is resilience so important? Even if we don't want to, we will all face different kinds of adversity in our lives. Small everyday setbacks on the one hand, and bigger crises on the other. Developmental crises are natural life transitions. So, for example, adolescence, retirement are parts of the crisis that most of us at some point will experience. Another type of crises are life crises, and those are negative turning points in life where a sense of security is lost. The good example for that is, for example, the loss of a job. Some of us also experience traumatic crises like war, natural disasters, and accidents, which we also have to cope with in terms of lifestyle. How balanced are your resources and the demands placed on you? If you're constantly operating at your absolute limits, it's only natural that you have very little strength left to handle challenges. Are you recharging as much energy as you're spending? Each of us needs the ability to adapt and cope with challenges. You could bring up a um, um, yeah, so like as Mikael already mentioned, we have the current situation worldwide is in a lot of places very critical, right? There's wars, there's natural disasters, and so on that obviously require an additional amount of resilience from a lot of people, and even people who are not directly involved. Just reading the news can feel challenging. So let's talk about how you can evaluate stress factors. You may have noticed that you and your friends sometimes interpret the same situation very differently. One person might find it highly stressful while another approaches it much more neutrally. Mental flexibility and resilience play a crucial role in how we interpret and respond to stress and adversity. Do we see situations as threats or challenges? Some people are naturally more sensitive to detecting threats and stressors in the environment. A resilient person can accept what cannot be changed and learn from failures. And they can also find opportunities and meaning even in adversity. Let's talk about how we can deal with our own reactions to adversity and to stress in general. One really important part of how we can deal with adversity, stress, and so on is focusing on what kind of thoughts we have during those times, because thoughts greatly impact stress, mood, and actions. Resilience helps us approach emotions with acceptance rather than avoidance or self criticism. Our thoughts shape our feelings and physical sensation, like our increased heart rate when we're stressed. Distancing ourselves from our thoughts reduces their power and might allow us to make decisions rather than responding. This is the difference between um, just feeling more in control in a situation and not feeling so. Instead of suppressing emotions, we should acknowledge and observe them from a neutral perspective. You are not your feelings. For example, instead of the thought, this won't work, try, I notice I'm thinking this won't work. This allows you to find some distance from the emotion while you're still acknowledging it. Resilient individuals don't experience fewer challenges, but use healthy coping strategies to manage them. Emotions, even the challenging ones, serve a purpose. So, for example, anger fuels change and self advocacy. Sadness helps us process loss. Positive emotions encourage beneficial actions. Our brain automatically interprets stimuli, triggering emotions, right? While we can't control which emotion arises, we can choose how we respond. Instead of reacting impulsively, we can step back, acknowledge emotions, and act wisely. By observing our emotions with objectivity, gentleness, and acceptance, we can regulate them without letting them control us. Coping with uncomfortable feelings. Many people try to suppress their emotions, for example, by pushing them away, trying to change them, or keeping themselves distracted. Unfortunately, these strategies won't work in the long term, as we discussed, because they only make the emotions more intense and decrease our well being over time. So, resilience does not mean that you have to deal with everything on your own. Instead, a resilient person asks for help and support in difficult situations. Sharing your feelings and thoughts with others helps to regulate intense emotions. So ask for support from those people around you or a professional or professionals like they work with Auntie. Another sign of resilience is showing self compassion. Resilient people treat themselves with kindness, especially when things are hard. Remember, you're not a superhuman, right? Nobody is. And you don't have to try to be one. It's perfectly normal and acceptable to feel bad. So don't blame yourself for it. Instead, allow yourself to feel whatever you feel while being gentle about it. In addition, do things that bring you feelings of comfort and safety. For example, take a warm bath, spend time with your loved ones, or listen to some soothing music. Treat yourself as you would treat your loved ones in a similar situation. Emotion is not only something in your mind, but it affects your body too. Therefore, you can reduce the intensity of an emotion by calming your body. For example, concentrating on your breathing, like we did in the beginning, calms your nervous system, which in turn calms the intensity of your emotional response. A nice walk in nature could do the same for you. So think about what works for you, what calms you down, and do those things when you feel overwhelmed. It also helps to have a variety of these things, these tools available to you, so you can choose them according to the available resources, how much time, how much energy, for example, you have at that moment. The benefit of doing those things will help you understand the links between your feelings, thoughts, and actions better. You realize that even though emotions are real and true, they are not always the best advisors. As you learn these emotion regulation skills, you learn to stop, take a moment to observe how you are feeling, and then decide what is the best thing for you to do in this situation. Let's talk about coping skills. People with low resilience often struggle to see opportunities to influence a situation or waste energy fighting against things beyond their control. In moments requiring acceptance, emotion, and emotional relief, it's essential to ask, what would help me right now? And what would I say to a friend in a similar situation? So let's consider an example here. Let's see, maybe you've made a mistake at work. You've missed a deadline. This might be something that you can actively address, but there are often parts that you can't do anything about. So let's say, um, um, I mean, like you have the deadline is passed, but you can do something. For example, you can approach the people involved, apologize, and see when you can maybe extend the deadline or do something else, so that in the end, the whatever you have to do will be done, even if it's a bit later than usual. In other times, you might have pretty much no direct control over the situation. So that would be, for example, a situation where a family member falls seriously ill. Here, in those situations, it's recommended to practice acceptance and self compassion instead, because resisting or denying the situation won't change the outcome. So take care of the things that you can impact and try to practice acceptance with the parts that unfortunately you can't control. Obviously, that's easier said than done, right? So, how do you accept the change? A resilient person is able to accept change as part of life and adapt to new circumstances. But what can help you accept the change? One thing is time. Whatever the change is, it takes time to accept it and adapt to it. Some changes more and some less. Often changes involve giving up on something important and grieving, and which must be done before the new reality can be accepted. So be patient and kind with yourself and give yourself time to adjust to all that is happening. Remind yourself as well that big decisions should not be made in a hurry. Give yourself time to reflect on the new situation. Remember what is important to you and what you need, and then act. Resilience is also learning from past adversity. Therefore, you may also find it helpful to think about all the changes that have taken place in your life so far. You can think back on what things have helped you earlier, what you have learned from your past experiences, and what strengths you have that will help you adapt to this change as well. Maybe you could use them this time as well. Change often evokes all kinds of thoughts, and sometimes quite one sided and unrealistically negative ones. Because our minds are programmed to avoid threats, we are more likely to notice things that are wrong. Therefore, pay conscious attention to all the good things in your life and all the things that are not affected by the change. Those things you are grateful for um, can help you. Although our first reaction would be that everything changes, and in reality, usually there are still many things in life that remain the same and are still going well. Noticing these things consciously will bring a sense of stability even during times of change. So let's see how we can promote resilience and well-being. Since we're all individuals, there's no single formula on how to adapt to change and challenges or be more resilient. The essential thing is that you will find ways that will help you to adapt and feel better. Next, we will go through a few tips that can help you. My first suggestion would be to focus on the basic stuff. As lame as it may sound, I know you've heard these things hundreds of times before, but I cannot overemphasize them. So remember, try to get enough sleep and rest. Eat fairly healthy and enough. And exercise in ways that do not burn you even more, but instead increase your well-being. These three things are the basis of your well-being and recovery, because when you're rested and recovered, you'll have more energy to deal with everything else in your life. Makes sense. Not so easy in practice all the time, I guess. Oh, I know. Okay, let's talk about a model for psychological recovery. A healthy lifestyle is the basis for recovery, but there are also other things you can do to recover. Spending your free time in a meaningful way is also a key element of it. So there's this model that you see here. It's called the drama model, and I'm going to go through each of the letters. Let's start with D. First of all, do things that will help you detach from work. Only when the demands of work are no longer present, the recovery process the recovery process can really start. So do something that'll make you forget your job and change for a while. Secondly, R. Do something that will make you relax. Relaxation can be a walk in the forest, knitting a sweater, reading a book. Again, whatever works for you. A. Autonomy is about feeling that you can influence the direction of your life. You make sure that you have time and opportunities to do your own thing. M. Psychological recovery is not just about passively lounging on the couch, unfortunately. It is also enhanced by doing things that give you an experience of achievement. So try new recipes, challenge yourself at the gym, or learn a new language. The next M. In the midst of challenges, it is good to remember what the most important things to your life are. The experience of meaningfulness is linked to well being, life satisfaction, and recovery. So do things in your free time that are genuinely important and valuable to you. A. And then, last but definitely not least, is affiliation. Spending time with your friends and loved ones is so important. After all, belonging is perhaps the most important condition of well being in life. In addition, other people can help take your mind off things that are bothering you. They can support you and then give you new perspectives on your situation. So, how are all these things currently happening in your life? Are you happy how things are, or would you like to change something? You notice I sped up a little bit. I'm sorry about that. So, strengthen your resilience. Resilience can also be strengthened in many other ways. Use these 2 points to explore your existing continuous issues. On the one hand, I'd like you to look at your everyday minor adversity, but also look back look at in general the major developments or life crises that we mentioned earlier. Ask yourself what helped you with them, and then also ask yourself what made it especially difficult for you to cope with it. And those questions answered can give you some hints on what's already going well, what you can use now, and also how you might want to develop and what you want to focus on in the future so that you can increase your resilience further. There's also this interesting approach, and it's called the circles of influence. And in difficult situations, we often waste energy worrying about things we can't control, which leads to a feeling of helplessness. So instead, I recommend that you ask yourself how much influence or control you have over certain aspects of the situation. So the yellow circle, the outer one, indicates things that you cannot control. You might want to focus on acceptance rather than trying to change them, because trying to change them is going to waste your time, unfortunately. The light yellow circle are things that you can slightly influence. Those you have to look at a bit more deeply and see how much influence or what parts you can influence and what things might help. And then again, practice acceptance for the parts that you can't control. And then finally, the white circle is about things that you can fully control. Here, I recommend acting on the things that you would recommend another person would do and see how the situation continues. All right, so let's see. The clock is ticking. I'm already very slightly over time, but take a moment to think about something that you'd like to take home with you as information or a thing that you'd like to try. Here's a couple of suggestions on what some of the main takeaways could be. Resilience means the psychological ability to bounce back, just as the packages Mikael talked about. It consists of genetic and environmental factors and often developed in childhood, but it can also be strengthened in adulthood. Resilience can be strengthened by, for example, taking care of basic needs, value work, or a solutions-oriented approach, and the ability to ask for help. Resilience is important for all of us as we all face adversity at times. All right, so that was a lot of information. Maybe there are some questions. Let's see if we can answer some of them.
Thank you, Margaretha. Very insightful for this presentation. We have a few questions, so let's dive into those briefly. So first one would be how to best support resilience with kids.
Well, one thing that that's immediately a tricky question. It depends on the age of the kids, right? I would probably recommend pretty early on finding ways to talk about emotions with children, obviously in an age appropriate way, depending on how old they are, and see if they can if you can together with them develop some ways that they can deal with feeling big emotions. So one thing, for example, that kids can use as well as adults are breathing exercises. So that's something that can be used to start the conversation of resilience, find words for emotions. There's this emotion wheel that I often recommend. If you Google that, you'll find it. And then breathing exercises are a good starting point for most ages.
Yes. And then second question, does the personality of the person have some effect on their resilience?
Absolutely. Yeah. Some people, as I think I mentioned that earlier, that some people tend to be more sensitive to stress. That is something that we often cannot very much influence. There's even some research that shows that there's a neurological basis to that some people tend to be more sensitive to any kind of stimuli and therefore also tend to be more stressed easily. And that can have an effect on your personality. So, for example, there's been research that showed that introverted people tend to be more sensitive and sensitive to stress also. And that means that introverted people, which is in some way a personality trait, tend to need and work more on resilience than perhaps some more extroverted individuals.
Yes. And those two can kind of also be tied together, how to support resilience with kids and the personality of the person. So those of us with children can also kind of easily think about it. What kind of example am I setting? So
Yes.
if your lovely 5-year-old son spills the milk and at the breakfast table, what is your reaction? So do you pull your hair? Do you scream and shout? Or do you just, no matter, let's clean it up and here's another class.
Good.
Last question. Is there any kind of standardized, validated ways to measure resilience?
Actually, I would have to look that up. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure there are some questionnaires that can determine it. I'm not sure how standardized they are.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It is a psychological trait, of course. So no doubt there are questionnaires and ways to research it. But then again, it ties heavily to the individual's own preference, their own history, and so on.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you very much for those questions. Like I promised in the beginning, a brief overlook on the latest two packages. Also, we have been promoting those in our channels as well. So the two latest packages that we have added are called Bounce Back and Bounce Back Together. The Bounce Back package is meant for individuals who need support in their personal situations and in general for people who want to move forward in difficult situations. So remembering that anecdote that where does the word resilience come from that Latin word resilire, so to bounce back when something happens. And like I said, changes and setbacks are part of life, and how do we deal with those individually is the main focus of that package. The second package is called Bounce Back Together, which is one of those leader packages that we offer for supervisors and managers. So, for instances, for managers who want to support their team in difficult scenarios, changes, adversities, failures, even, and who want to, in general, strengthen their own team's ability to cope when something happens. And of course, supervisors and managers play a key role in helping their own teams tackle whatever might be going on. And especially in business life, well, I'm certain we can all state that change is a constant. And of course, businesses do need to evolve as well. Usually, when there's something changing, there's also some kind of resistance going on, whether or not the change in itself is a positive or negative one. We are kind of creatures of our habits, and we need support in dealing when we are faced with something new. But with that, hey, we come to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for all the comments, for the questions. Being mindful of the time, I'm going to say thank you at this point and let you people move on to the next greatest adventure for this day. And last anecdote, do keep in mind that, hey, you do have access to Auntie service, and the latest two packages have also been automatically added to all of our customers' package portfolio. Thank you. Hopefully, I will see you again with the next topic. And thank you also, Margaretha, for a very insightful webinar.
Thank you.